You probably think you know how World War II ended. The atomic bombs, Japan's surrender, Germany already defeated. But here's what you don't know. Deep in the ruins of Nazi Germany, Hitler's generals were wrestling with a terrifying realization that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They had been closer to nuclear weapons than anyone imagined, and yet they had failed spectacularly, just as their enemies succeeded beyond belief. What we're about to explore comes from declassified intelligence files, prisoner interrogation transcripts, and secret recordings that weren't released until decades after the war ended. This is the story of how Nazi commanders learned about the atomic bomb, and how that knowledge shattered everything they thought they knew about warfare, science, and their own place in history. Picture this. It's early 1945, and Germany is collapsing. The Third Reich, that was supposed to last 1,000 years, is crumbling after just 12. But in the chaos of retreat, something strange is happening in the forests of Thuringia. Soviet intelligence reports speak of mysterious explosions, scorched earth where nothing grows, and German soldiers who simply vanished without a trace. Allied commanders read these reports with skepticism, but also with growing unease. What exactly had the Germans been working on? The truth is, Nazi Germany had been pursuing nuclear weapons since 1939. Werner Heisenberg, one of the world's most brilliant physicists, led their atomic program. But by 1944, while the Manhattan Project was racing toward completion with unlimited resources and 130,000 workers, Heisenberg's team was struggling with limited materials, constant bombing, and the chaos of a nation at war. They had the theory. After all, German scientists had discovered nuclear fission in the first place. But theory and reality are two very different things. General Alfred Jodl, Hitler's chief of operations, received regular briefings on Germany's secret weapons programs. The V-2 rockets, the jet fighters, and yes, the nuclear research. But the reports on atomic progress were always vague, always promising breakthroughs that never quite materialized. As one Wehrmacht officer later recalled, the mood in command meetings had shifted from confidence to desperation. They were running out of time, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, American scientists were putting the finishing touches on a weapon that would change warfare forever. But the Germans didn't know this. They assumed their enemies faced the same technical challenges they did. How wrong they were. Then came August 6th, 1945. At 8:15 in the morning, a single American bomber dropped a single bomb on Hiroshima. In an instant, 80,000 people were dead. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. The nuclear age had begun, and Nazi Germany, already defeated, could only watch from the sidelines as the world entered a terrifying new era. But here's where the story gets truly fascinating. Thanks to a secret British intelligence operation called Farm Hall, we know exactly how Germany's top nuclear scientists reacted to the news of Hiroshima. The British had captured Heisenberg and 9 other German physicists, and they were secretly recording every conversation in a mansion outside London. When the news broke, Heisenberg's first reaction was disbelief. He actually got the science wrong, claiming the Americans couldn't possibly have built a uranium bomb. At first, I couldn't believe the reports, he later wrote. But then I realized the Americans had succeeded where we failed. It was a devastating blow to both science and our efforts. Picture the scene. 10 of Germany's brightest minds, sitting in comfortable chairs in an English country house, suddenly realizing that their enemies had achieved what they had thought impossible. The recordings capture their hushed voices, their growing comprehension, and finally, their stunned silence. Otto Hahn, the chemist who had first discovered nuclear fission back in 1938, was devastated. "I felt guilt when the bomb exploded," he wrote to his family. "Though we did not build the weapon, our discovery led to this apocalypse." The man whose scientific breakthrough had made nuclear weapons possible was now confronting the reality of what he had unleashed upon the world. But the scientists weren't the only Germans grappling with this new reality. Captured German generals were also learning about the atomic bomb, and their reactions reveal just how completely they had misunderstood what they were up against. General Wilhelm Keitel, head of the German armed forces, spent long hours in American interrogation rooms debating what might have been. "We discussed whether Germany could have turned the tide with such a weapon," he told his interrogators. "Our experiments never came close, and that failure now haunts us." The irony was almost too bitter to comprehend. Here were the heirs of German scientific tradition, the nation that had produced Einstein, Planck, and Heisenberg, and they had been outmaneuvered by their enemies in the very field where they should have excelled. But there's another layer to this story, one that remained classified for decades. Soviet intelligence reports from 1945 speak of strange explosions in the Thuringian forest, of German nuclear tests that may have occurred in the final months of the war. Lieutenant Hans Müller, a 22-year-old Wehrmacht soldier stationed in the area, wrote in his diary, "After the strange explosions near our camp, we found nothing but scorched earth and vanished comrades. Some whispered of a new type of weapon, some refused to believe it." Were these reports accurate? Had Germany actually tested nuclear devices? The evidence remains controversial to this day. What's certain is that German prisoners of war in the area described scenes that sounded uncomfortably familiar to later observers of atomic tests: the flash of light, the mushroom cloud, the eerie silence that followed. If these tests actually occurred, then the tragedy becomes even more profound. Germany may have achieved nuclear fission in a weapon only to lack the resources and time to deploy it effectively. They were so close and yet so impossibly far from changing the course of the war. Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando and one of the most dangerous men in Europe, captured the mood perfectly. "There was an uneasy silence within the SS after the news of the bomb," he later wrote. "Jokes faded, replaced by fear that the war was truly lost." For these professional soldiers, men who had spent their careers thinking about tactics and strategy, the atomic bomb represented something almost incomprehensible. It wasn't just a bigger explosive, it was a fundamental shift in the nature of warfare itself. One plane, one bomb, one city gone. How do you defend against something like that? The German nuclear program's failure wasn't just about resources or time, though those certainly mattered. It was also about the fundamental nature of Nazi society itself. While the Manhattan Project brought together the world's best minds in a collaborative effort, Germany's nuclear program was hampered by infighting, secrecy, and the regime's own paranoia. Heisenberg himself became a controversial figure after the war, claiming at various times that he had deliberately slowed Germany's nuclear program for moral reasons. The truth is probably more complex and less heroic. The German program suffered from technical mistakes, resource shortages, and perhaps most critically, a failure to grasp the industrial scale required to build atomic weapons. But imagine being Werner Heisenberg in August 1945, sitting in that English mansion, listening to BBC reports about Hiroshima. You're one of the world's greatest physicists. You've been working on nuclear weapons for 6 years, and you've just learned that your enemies have succeeded where you failed. The farm hall transcripts capture his voice as the reality sinks in. His growing understanding of just how thoroughly he had been outmaneuvered. The American physicists working on the Manhattan Project had access to virtually unlimited resources. They had entire cities built in secret, massive industrial facilities, and the full backing of the American government. Heisenberg's team was working in a basement laboratory while Allied bombs fell around them.